Since you couldn't give us an heir, this marriage is over. My father-in-law said it like he was announcing a change in dinner reservations. Calm. Final. Practiced. The chandelier above the dining table glowed too bright, catching the crystal glasses and scattering little shards of light across the white tablecloth. It was the kind of room designed to make everything look expensive and small, especially me. I remember the exact time because I looked at the clock on the wall when he said it. 8:17 p.m. Tuesday. I had always hated Tuesdays. The folder was already sitting in front of me. Thick. Cream-colored. My name typed neatly on the tab. I hadn't touched it yet, but I knew what it was before he even spoke. You don't need to open a coffin to know what's inside. Still, I opened it. Divorce papers. Clean. Organized. Tabs marking where I needed to sign. Someone had taken their time preparing this. This wasn't anger. This was a plan. I looked at my husband. Daniel didn't look back. He was staring at his wine glass like it held answers. Or maybe like if he focused hard enough he could disappear into it. His fingers traced the rim slowly, avoiding my eyes, avoiding the moment. Avoiding me. That hurt more than anything his father could say. We had been married for 8 years. 8 years of shared rent before the house, shared groceries, shared late-night arguments about nothing and everything. 8 years of quiet routines, coffee at 6:30 a.m., his keys always forgotten by the door, the way he used to pull me closer in his sleep without waking up. 8 years. Reduced to a folder. I think it's for the best, my father-in-law continued, adjusting his cufflinks. You're still young. You can start over. Start over. Like I was a failed investment. I closed the folder slowly, pressing my palm against the cover as if that could hold everything together. My chest felt tight, but my mind was strangely clear. Too clear. Because this wasn't just about children. It never had been. I see, I said. My voice sounded steady. That surprised me. No one else spoke. Even the house seemed to hold its breath. There were 4 of us at the table. My father-in-law at the head, of course. Daniel to my right. Me. And across from me, Emily. My best friend. She had been quiet the entire evening, barely touching her food. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second and there was something there. Something I couldn't name yet. Not pity. Not exactly. I turned back to the folder. I'm sorry, Daniel finally said, but it came out hollow like he was reading a line he didn't believe in. For what? I asked. He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. Because what exactly do you apologize for? For giving up? For lying? For letting someone else speak for you? Or for the things you don't say, the things that matter most? Picked up the pen. It was heavier than I expected. Funny the details your brain clings to when everything is falling apart. The weight of a pen. The hum of the air conditioner. The faint smell of garlic from a dinner no one had really eaten. I signed. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Each signature felt like a small, controlled explosion. Quiet. Contained. But irreversible. No one stopped me. No one said, wait. That told me everything I needed to know. Halfway through, my father-in-law poured himself more wine. The sound of liquid filling the glass echoed in the silence, almost obscene. You're handling this very maturely, he said. I almost laughed. Mature. Is that what they called it when a woman didn't scream? When she didn't beg? When she didn't make a scene in a room that was never meant for her in the first place? I signed the last page. Set the pen down. And for a moment everything was still. I looked at Daniel one last time. Is this what you want? I asked. This time he did look at me. But only for a second. Yes, he said. Just one word. 8 years reduced to one word. I nodded. Okay. I expected to feel something dramatic. Anger. Grief. Maybe even relief. Instead I felt nothing. And that scared me more than anything. Because when you feel nothing, it means something inside you has already started to close. I pushed the folder toward my father-in-law. There you go. He smiled. Not kindly. Not cruelly. Just satisfied. Transaction complete. But before he could say anything else, a chair scraped against the floor. Emily stood up. The sound cut through the room like a crack of thunder. I think you should read this first, she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. She reached down beside her chair and picked up a brown envelope. I hadn't seen her bring it in. Had she been holding it the whole time? She walked around the table slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step deliberate, controlled. She stopped beside my father-in-law and placed the envelope in front of him. "For you," she said. He frowned slightly, annoyed at the interruption. "What is this?" "Just something you should know," Emily replied. There it was again. That tone. Not nervous. Not uncertain. Certain. My father-in-law glanced at Daniel, then back at the envelope. For a second he hesitated. Then he opened it, pulled out the papers inside, and started reading. I watched his face. First nothing changed. Then his eyes slowed. His brow tightened. And just like that, the color drained from his face. The man who had just dismantled my life in under 10 minutes looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice sharp now. Emily didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly very aware of my own heartbeat. Slow. Steady. For the first time that night I felt something. Not anger. Not sadness. Something colder. Curiosity. I turned my head slightly toward Daniel. He looked confused. No, worse than confused. Afraid. "What is it?" he asked. His father didn't respond. He was flipping through the pages now, faster, his hands no longer steady. "Dad." Daniel pressed. Still nothing. Emily finally spoke. "You should probably read page 4 again," she said softly. My father-in-law froze. Then slowly he turned back a page. His lips moved silently as he reread whatever was there. And that's when I knew. Whatever was inside that envelope, it wasn't just bad. It was devastating. I folded my hands in my lap, watching the man who had just ended my marriage unravel in real time. And for the first time that night, I smiled. Not because I understood what was happening, but because deep down I realized something very important. This wasn't over. Not even close. No one spoke for a full 10 seconds. That might not sound like much, but in a room like that where every second had been scripted, controlled, rehearsed, it felt like a system failure. Like something had gone off the rails, and no one knew how to fix it. My father-in-law finally looked up. Not at me. At Emily. "Explain this," he said. The authority in his voice was still there, but thinner now. Like a cracked surface you only notice when the light hits it just right. Emily didn't rush. She walked back to her seat, sat down, folded her hands neatly in front of her, and met his gaze. "I thought clarity might help," she said. "Clarity." I almost smiled again. Daniel leaned forward, trying to see the papers, but his father pulled them closer instinctively. "Dad, what is it?" he asked. Still nothing. That was when Emily turned to me. "You might want to hear this too," she said. There was something steady in her voice. Grounding. Like she'd already walked this road in her head 100 times. I nodded slowly. "Go ahead." My father-in-law exhaled sharply, like he was deciding whether to speak or to shut it all down. But whatever was in that envelope, it had already taken control of the room. "She owns half the company," he said finally. The words landed strangely, like they didn't belong in the same reality as everything else that had just happened. "I'm sorry, what?" Daniel said. I blinked. "Who does?" I asked. My father-in-law looked at me then. Really looked at me for the first time that night. "You," he said. For a moment, I thought this was some kind of twisted joke. "I think you're confused," I said carefully. "I don't own anything of yours." Emily slid a second document across the table toward me. "Read the header," she said. Picked it up. My name. Not handwritten. Not added in later. Printed. Formal. Legal. I scanned the first paragraph, my eyes catching on phrases that felt both familiar and distant at the same time. Equity transfer. Silent partner. Initial capital contribution. My fingers tightened around the paper. This is from 8 years ago," I said. "The week before your wedding," Emily replied. And just like that, something clicked. 8 years ago I had written a check. Not a huge one. Not life-changing. But everything I had saved at the time. $120,000. Years of working 2 jobs, skipping vacations, saying no to things most people didn't think twice about. Daniel had come to me with a temporary opportunity. His father's company was struggling. Cash flow issues. A short-term injection would stabilize things. It wasn't an investment, not officially. More like support. Just until things smooth out, Daniel had said back then. We'll pay you back in a year. 2 max. I hadn't hesitated. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You build together. Or at least you think you are. I remember this, I said slowly. But this isn't what we agreed on. No, Emily said. It's what they filed. Silence again. Hearts don't actually drop, by the way. That's a metaphor people use. What really happens is, everything inside you goes very still. Like your body is trying to process something too big to move around. They listed you as a silent equity holder, Emily continued. 49%. Daniel's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood up. That's not possible, he said. We would have known. Would you? Emily asked, her tone almost gentle. He turned to his father. Dad. My father-in-law didn't answer immediately. And that was the answer. You told me it was a loan, I said, my voice quieter now. It was, he snapped too quickly. Emily shook her head. No. It was documented as equity to avoid certain liabilities at the time. Temporary, like he said. But it was never reversed. I looked back down at the paper. 49%. Not a loan. Ownership. All these years. Every expansion. Every new contract. Every property acquisition. I had been there. On paper. Invisible. That's why you needed her signature, Emily added. The room shifted again. Signature. Daniel repeated. My father-in-law's jaw tightened. For the restructuring, Emily said. The one you're pushing through next quarter. I looked up. What restructuring? Daniel looked at his father again, panic starting to creep in. Dad, what is she talking about? Still nothing. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out another set of documents. Projected valuation after the merger, she said, placing them on the table. Rough estimate $48 million. The number hung in the air. Heavy. Real. And since she owns 49%, Emily continued, glancing at me briefly, that makes her share worth a little over $23 million. No one moved. No one breathed. Hystère daher. Not because I didn't understand the math, but because I was trying to understand everything else. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Emily held my gaze. Because they were about to erase you. My stomach dropped, not dramatically but quietly, like a realization settling into place. The divorce, I said. She nodded. With the right clauses, your equity could be classified as separate from the marital estate and transferred during the restructuring without your active involvement. I turned to my father-in-law. That's what this is about? He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. It's business, he said flatly. Business. I let out a small breath. Of course it was. Not infertility. Not disappointment. Not family. Just business. You were going to take it, I said. Not a question. A statement. He leaned back in his chair, regaining some of his composure now that the truth was out. You were never involved, he said. You wouldn't have understood what to do with it. I nodded slowly. You're right, I said. That seemed to surprise him. I didn't understand, I continued. Not then. I placed the papers down carefully, aligning the edges with the table as if that small act of control mattered. But I do now. Daniel looked between us, his face pale. You knew about this? He asked me. I met his eyes. No, I said. But I'm starting to understand a lot of things I didn't before. Like the sudden urgency of this dinner. The timing. The pressure. The silence. 8 years of little things that hadn't made sense, now snapping together like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't known I was solving. Emily leaned back in her chair. We've been reviewing documents for about 6 weeks, she said. I turned to her again. You've been doing this for 6 weeks? She nodded. I didn't want to bring you something incomplete. There it was. That strange feeling again. Not just curiosity now. Something sharper. Why? I asked. Came out softer than I expected. Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for her glass of water, took a small sip, then set it down. Because you deserve to know before they decided your future for you, she said. Simple. Clean. But there was something else underneath it. Something I couldn't quite reach yet. My father-in-law stood up abruptly. This changes nothing, he said. The divorce is still happening. I looked up at him. For you maybe, I said. He frowned. For me, I continued. Everything just changed. And for the first time that night, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was thinking, planning, recalculating. The folder with the divorce papers was still sitting in front of him. Signed. Final. Irreversible. But the game they thought they had already won? It hadn't even started yet. I folded my hands again, feeling that cold, steady clarity settle deeper into my bones. They had spent weeks planning my exit. 6 weeks, Emily had said. I wondered how long it would take to plan my return. The strange thing about betrayal isn't the moment it happens. It's how far back it reaches. That night didn't end with shouting or broken glass. No one flipped the table. No one chased anyone out of the house. It ended quietly. Too quietly. My father-in-law gathered the documents from the envelope like they were contaminated, slid them back inside and said, "We'll discuss this with legal." Not our legal. His legal. Daniel tried to talk to me in the hallway as I was leaving. "Can we just slow down for a second?" he said, running a hand through his hair. This got out of control. I paused by the door, my coat already on. Out of control? I repeated. Yeah, I mean, Emily blindsiding us like that. These documents I didn't even know. I looked at him. Really looked. For years I had filled in the gaps for him. Explained his silences. Translated his inaction into something kinder, softer, more understandable. That night I stopped. "You didn't know?" I asked. "No," he said quickly. "I swear." I nodded once. "I believe you." Relief flickered across his face for half a second. Then I added, "That might be the worst part." He flinched like I'd slapped him, and I walked out. The next morning, I woke up at 5:12 a.m. Not because of an alarm, because my brain refused to stay asleep. I made coffee the way I always did, 2 spoons of grounds, a splash of milk, no sugar. Routine is a strange kind of comfort when everything else has shifted. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The folder Emily had given me was already scanned and organized. Of course it was. Every document labeled. Dates cross-referenced. Notes in the margins. 6 weeks. She hadn't been exaggerating. I started reading. Not skimming. Reading. Every contract. Every amendment. Every signature. And there it was, buried in legal language dense enough to make most people give up halfway through. My name. Repeated. Consistent. Real. 49%. Not symbolic. Not temporary. Binding. Legally enforceable. And more importantly, untouched. They had never transferred it out. Never diluted it. Never removed me. Why? Because they couldn't. Not without me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They hadn't kept me there out of generosity. They had kept me there because it was convenient. Because removing me would have triggered taxes, disclosures, complications. So they left me. Forgotten. Uninvolved. Safe. Until I wasn't. By 8:30 a.m. I was sitting across from a lawyer. Her office was smaller than my father-in-law's, but somehow felt more solid. Less decorative, more functional. "Walk me through everything," she said. So I did. The dinner. The divorce papers. The envelope. The 8 years I hadn't realized I'd been part of something much bigger than my marriage. She didn't interrupt. Just took notes. When I finished, she leaned back slightly, tapping her pen against the desk. "Well," she said, "this is unusually clean." "Clean?" I echoed. "In your favor," she clarified. "That doesn't happen often in cases like this." I let out a small breath. "I'm guessing they don't see it that way." She smiled faintly. "No. They probably don't." She turned her monitor slightly so I could see. "If these documents hold, and they appear to, then you are a minority owner with significant rights. Voting rights. Profit distribution. And most importantly, approval authority for major structural changes." "The restructuring," I said. She nodded. They can't proceed without you. A slow, quiet realization settled in. For the first time since the dinner, something inside me felt steady. Not emotional. Strategic. What would you do? I asked. She didn't hesitate. I'd let them think you're still the same person who signed those divorce papers without a fight. I almost smiled. That won't be hard. The next 2 weeks moved quickly. Faster than anything I'd experienced in years. Because this time I wasn't waiting for something to happen. I was making it happen. We filed a notice. Not aggressive. Not confrontational. Just present. A formal acknowledgement of my ownership stake. A request for full financial disclosure. A statement of intent to review all pending structural changes. Legal language for, I'm here now. Their response came within 48 hours. Predictable. Dismissive. They questioned the validity of the documents. Suggested administrative errors. Implied misunderstandings. Classic. My lawyer didn't even blink. They're stalling, she said. Which means they're worried. Good. Let them be. Because while they were trying to control the narrative, we were building something else. A timeline. Every decision made in the last 8 years. Every contract signed. Every dollar moved. Patterns started to emerge. Not illegal, but aggressive. Risky. The kind of decisions that look brilliant when they work, and disastrous when someone starts asking questions. Here, my lawyer said one afternoon, pointing to a series of transactions. This is interesting. I leaned closer. Offshore accounts? I asked. Not necessarily illegal, she said. But definitely worth a conversation. I nodded slowly. A conversation. That was one way to put it. 3 weeks after the dinner, they called for a meeting. Not at the house. At the office. Neutral ground. Or at least that's what they thought. I arrived 5 minutes early. Same building I'd visited once before years ago, when I still thought I was just Daniel's wife. The receptionist recognized my name this time. That was new. The conference room was all glass walls and polished surfaces. My father-in-law was already there. So was Daniel. And 2 lawyers I didn't recognize. They stood when I walked in. Not out of respect. Out of uncertainty. Good. I took my seat without saying anything. My lawyer sat beside me, calm as ever. Let's get straight to it, my father-in-law said. We're prepared to offer a settlement. Of course they were. He slid a document across the table. I didn't touch it. Read it, he insisted. I will, I said. Later. His jaw tightened. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be. I tilted my head slightly. Am I? He leaned forward. You were never involved in the business. This is a technicality, nothing more. We're offering you a generous exit. Generous. That word again. I finally picked up the document. Skimmed the first page. Then the second. Then I set it back down. You're offering me $2 million, I said. Yes, he replied. Clean. Immediate. No drawn-out litigation. I nodded. That's about 9% of what my share is worth. Silence. One of his lawyers cleared his throat. Valuations can vary. I'm aware, I said, cutting him off gently. That's why I brought my own. My lawyer slid our documents across the table. Numbers. Breakdowns. Projections. Reality. My father-in-law didn't touch them this time. He just stared at me. You think you can walk in here and dismantle everything we've built? He asked. I met his gaze. No, I said calmly. I think you already built it, with me in it. That landed. Hard. Daniel finally spoke. We can fix this, he said, his voice almost desperate now. We don't have to turn this into a war. I looked at him. For a moment I almost saw the man I married. Almost. Then I remembered the wine glass. The silence. The one word. Yes. No, I said. We don't. And then I leaned forward slightly, folding my hands on the table. But we do have to finish it. I nodded toward the documents in front of them. Page 4, I said. The same words Emily had used. My father-in-law's expression shifted. Just slightly, but enough. Go on, I added. One of the lawyers flipped to the page. Read. Stopped. Read again. What is this? He asked. My lawyer answered. A formal notice of review regarding financial practices over the past 8 years. The room went still. Specifically, she continued, transactions that may expose the company to regulatory scrutiny. There it was. Not an accusation. Not yet. Just a possibility. A door. And behind that door? Consequences. My father-in-law leaned back slowly. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked tired. This is unnecessary, he said. Is it? I asked. He didn't answer. Because now he understood. This wasn't about emotion. Or revenge in the loud, messy sense. This was quiet. Precise. Legal. And completely within my rights. I stood up. So here's what's going to happen, I said. No one interrupted. You're going to revise that offer, I continued, nodding at the settlement document. You're going to include full transparency on all financials. And you're going to treat me like exactly what I am. I paused. Let the moment settle. A partner. No one spoke. I picked up my bag. Then I looked at Daniel one last time. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Just clarity. You wanted an heir, I said softly. I guess you forgot you already had an investor. And with that, I walked out. They revised the offer. Not right away. At first, they tried one more time to push back, small emails carefully worded testing the edges, suggesting delays, requesting additional verification. The usual dance people do when they're hoping the other side gets tired first. I didn't. Because I wasn't alone anymore. My lawyer handled every response with the same calm precision she'd shown from day one. No emotion. No urgency. Just facts, deadlines, and consequences laid out in clean professional language. Emily stayed close too. Closer than she had been in years. She came by my place a few nights a week, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just with silence. We didn't always talk about the case. Sometimes we talked about nothing at all. Old college stories, bad dates from our 20s, the time we tried to cut our own bangs and both ended up wearing hats for a month. Normal things. Grounding things. But every now and then I'd catch her watching me. Like she was checking to make sure I was still okay. I am, I told her once. We were sitting on my couch, half-empty containers of Thai food spread across the coffee table. I know, she said. Then she added quieter. You just don't feel things the same way right now. She wasn't wrong. It wasn't that I felt nothing anymore. It was that everything had shifted. Before I used to react. Now I observed. Before I used to hope things would work out. Now I made sure they did or didn't. There's a difference. The second offer came 10 days after the meeting. It was better. Not fair, but better. $6.5 million. A clean exit.
Non disclosure clauses. Non compete clauses.
Pages and pages of language designed to make everything disappear quietly. I read it once. Then I handed it to my lawyer. No, I said. She nodded. I figured. We didn't counter immediately. That was part of the strategy. Silence, used correctly, is uncomfortable. People start to fill it with assumptions. And assumptions lead to mistakes. 3 days later they made one. A transfer. Large. Rushed. Poorly timed. My lawyer called me as soon as she saw it. They're trying to move assets, she said. Before what? I asked. Before you can lock things down further. I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear. Can they? Not without making it worse for themselves, she said. Which they just did. I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of stress. Out of recognition. They were panicking. And panic is messy. File it, I said. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't need to. The next meeting wasn't scheduled. It was requested. Urgently. Tone different. No more confidence. No more control. Just pressure. We met in the same conference room. But the energy had changed. You can feel it when a room no longer belongs to the same people. My father-in-law looked older. Not physically, but in the way he held himself. Less rigid. More careful. Daniel barely spoke. When he did, it was short, like he was choosing every word and still getting it wrong. Their lawyers did most of the talking this time. They're prepared to offer a full buyout based on updated valuation, one of them said. I didn't respond. Additionally, he continued, They're willing to waive certain conditions previously included. I glanced at my lawyer. She gave a small nod. Numbers? I asked. He slid the document across the table. I opened it. Read the first line. Then the second. Then I stopped. Not because I didn't understand. Because I did. $21.8 million. Not exact. Not perfect. But close enough to reality that it didn't feel like an insult anymore. I looked up. And the rest? I asked. Full financial disclosure, he said. As requested. And the review? A pause. Then, withdrawn. With no further action. Of course. That was the trade. Money for silence. Clean. Efficient. Predictable. I closed the document. You'll also cover all legal fees, I said. Another pause. Then a nod. Yes. I leaned back slightly. For a moment no one spoke. This was the part people imagine as satisfying. The moment where everything comes together. Where you feel victorious. But the truth is, it didn't feel like that. It felt quiet. Like finishing a long calculation and finally arriving at an answer you already knew was coming. I want one more thing, I said. My father-in-law's eyes narrowed slightly. What? I met his gaze. No contact, I said. From either of you. Ever. Daniel flinched. Wait, he started. I didn't look at him. This isn't negotiable. Silence. Then my father-in-law nodded once. Fine. Just like that. 8 years. Reduced to a clause. The paperwork took another week. Signatures. Transfers. Confirmations. Numbers moving across accounts in ways that would have felt unreal to me a month ago. $21.8 million. I checked it twice. Not because I didn't trust the system. Because I had learned not to trust anything blindly anymore. The divorce finalized quietly. No court drama. No last-minute confessions. Just documents filed, processed, completed. Daniel sent one message. I'm sorry. For everything. I read it. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of closure. A few days later, Emily and I went out for dinner. Same kind of place we used to go to in our 20s, nothing fancy, slightly too loud, menus with too many options. We ordered wine. Real wine this time. Not the kind poured during negotiations. To new beginnings, she said, raising her glass. I smiled faintly. To better decisions, I replied. We clinked glasses. Took a sip. Then she looked at me a little more serious now. You okay? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought. Then I nodded. Yeah, I said. And for the first time it felt completely true. I never saw my father-in-law again. I heard things though. Small pieces of information that drift through the same circles. The restructuring went through. Eventually. But not as smoothly as planned. There were reviews. Questions. Delays. Nothing catastrophic. But enough to leave a mark. As for Daniel, I don't know much. And I don't try to. Because some chapters don't need updates. They just need endings. The last thing I did before closing that part of my life was sit down at my kitchen table, the same one where this all really began, and open my laptop one more time. Not to review documents. Not to check numbers. Just to sit. To look at everything I had gone through. Everything I had almost lost without even knowing it. And everything I had managed to keep. Not just the money. Something else. Something harder to define. Control. Clarity. Myself. People think revenge is loud. They picture shouting matches, slam doors, dramatic speeches where everything finally gets said. That's not how it works. Not really. The kind that stays with you, the kind that actually changes something, is quiet. It happens in decisions. In pauses. In the things you choose not to say. 3 months after everything was finalized, I moved. Not far. Just far enough that I didn't have to drive past the old house or the office, or any of the places that still carried echoes I didn't need anymore. The new place was smaller. Simpler. Mine. I bought it outright. No loans. No shared ownership. No signatures I didn't fully understand. The first night there, I sat on the floor in the living room with a glass of cheap wine and a takeout container balanced on my knee. No furniture yet. No decorations. Just space. Felt honest. I didn't quit working. That surprised a lot of people. When money shows up like that, suddenly, overwhelmingly, there's this assumption that you'll disappear. Travel. Indulge. Step away from anything that looks like effort. I didn't. Because the money wasn't the point. It never had been. I started small. Consulting at first. Then investing, but differently this time. Carefully. Deliberately. I asked questions I used to feel embarrassed asking. I read contracts line by line. I learned the language that had once been used to keep me out of the conversation. It turns out, understanding isn't that complicated. Just takes time. And the willingness to admit what you don't know. Emily stayed. Not just physically. She became part of my life in a way that felt more real than before. One night, a few weeks after I moved in, we were sitting on my new couch, actual furniture this time, when I finally asked her the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since the beginning. How did you know? I said. She looked at me. Know what? All of it, I said. The documents. The timing. The fact that they were about to cut me out. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then she exhaled. Because I used to date someone in their accounting department, she said. I blinked. Of course you did. She smiled faintly. It ended a long time ago, she added. But when I heard about the restructuring, something felt off. So you started digging, I said. She nodded. At first it was just curiosity, she admitted. Then I saw your name. I leaned back against the couch, processing that. My name, I repeated. Buried, she said. But there. And you didn't tell me right away. It wasn't an accusation. Just a fact. I wanted to be sure, she said. If I came to you with half the story, they could have shut it down before you even realized what was happening. That made sense. Everything she had done, every step, had been careful, calculated, protective. Thank you, I said. She shrugged lightly. You would have done the same. Maybe. Or maybe I would have hesitated. Doubted myself. Waited too long. That used to be who I was. I don't think about Daniel much anymore. Not in the way people expect. There's no anger left. No lingering sadness. Just a kind of distant understanding. He wasn't a villain. Not entirely. He was weak. And weakness, when paired with the wrong kind of influence, can do a lot more damage than outright cruelty. As for my father-in-law, I learned something from him. Not the lesson he intended, but something useful. Control isn't about power. It's about information. Who has it? Who understands it? And who knows how to use it at the right time? Sometimes people ask me what I would have done differently. If I could go back. If I could change the moment at that table. The folder. The signatures. The silence. I always give the same answer. Nothing. Because signing those papers, that wasn't weakness. That was clarity. It forced everything into the open. It showed me exactly where I stood. And more importantly, where I didn't. The truth is, I didn't win because I was smarter. Or stronger. Or even more prepared. I won because, at some point, I stopped reacting emotionally to something that required strategy. I paused. I listened. I paid attention. And then I acted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just effectively. There's a moment people don't talk about much. The one after everything is over. After the money is transferred. After the documents are signed. After the people who used to define your life are no longer part of it. It's quiet. Almost too quiet. And you're left with a simple question. Now what? For me, the answer wasn't complicated. I lived. Better than before. Not because everything was perfect. But because everything was mine. My decisions. My mistakes. My future. A few weeks ago I found the pen I used that night. The heavy one. It had somehow ended up at the bottom of a drawer. Tucked between old receipts and things I hadn't bothered to throw away yet. Picked it up. Turned it over in my hand. It didn't feel as heavy anymore. Or maybe I was just stronger. I thought about the woman who had held it at 8:17 p.m. on a Tuesday night. The one who signed her name without fully understanding what she was signing. The one who thought she was losing everything. I don't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Because she didn't lose. She just didn't know she was holding the winning hand. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's simple. Don't rush to react when something breaks. Don't fill silence with panic. And don't assume the story ends where someone else says it does. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sign the paper, smile, and wait, because the real story, the one that actually matters, that's the part you write next.